I'm Lucille. I'm 67 years old, a retired elementary school librarian, and I used to think I had a pretty good sense of who I could trust. That belief changed one summer afternoon at my son's barbecue on what should have been an ordinary Saturday. The sun was high, the smell of burgers filled the air, and my granddaughter Lily was chasing bubbles across the yard like joy was the only language she knew. My son Tom stood at the grill trying not to burn the hot dogs. His wife Emily was on the patio swirling white wine in a glass and laughing at something one of her friends said. Everything looked normal. Until my phone buzzed. I glanced down and saw a message from an unknown number. Just 6 words: walk away. Don't talk to anyone. Now. My heart skipped. I read it again. Then again. It made no sense. And yet something deep in my chest turned cold. I looked around the yard. Nothing was wrong. The kids were giggling. The music played softly through the speakers, and the sky was clear. But that message felt like a warning, a command, like someone was watching someone who knew more than I did. I slipped my phone into my purse and stood up slowly. I told no one. I didn't grab my bag or say goodbye. I just walked out through the side gate, trying to keep my steps even as my hands started to tremble. I crossed the street to where my car was parked, keys already in hand before I knew I'd reached for them. I got in and locked the doors. From the driver's seat, I looked back at the house. It still looked the same. The blue shutters, the trimmed hedges, the neat front porch Emily decorated every season, like something out of a catalog. I almost convinced myself I'd overreacted, until I saw the first police cruiser turn onto the street, then another, and another. Within seconds, the quiet suburban road was filled with flashing lights and officers in tactical gear. I saw 2 of them approach the front door with purpose hands near their holsters, and another team fanning out to the side of the house. I sat frozen behind the wheel, breath caught in my throat. Neighbors were coming out, phones raised, filming like it was a scene from a show. But this was my family's house. My son was in there, my granddaughter, and so was Emily. I didn't know what was happening. I only knew that I'd been told to leave. And now I was watching something unravel that I hadn't even known was tangled. My phone buzzed again. Same unknown number. This time just 3 words. Are you safe? Before that day, before the message and the flashing lights, I still held on to the idea that my family was mostly fine. Not perfect, not always easy, but intact. I believed that if I showed up, kept quiet, and smiled through the awkwardness, I'd still be part of something that mattered. Tom is my only child. He teaches high school math and has the kind of steady, decent heart that makes him easy to root for. He married Emily 8 years ago, and from the beginning, she was polished in a way I'd never been. Blonde, articulate, always put together. She had a way of making everyone feel like she was doing them a favor just by being present. At first, I tried to see her as the daughter I never had. I brought over casseroles, complimented her home, and helped fold laundry when the baby was born. But there was always a quiet tension, like I was intruding on something curated and fragile. Emily smiled often, but her eyes stayed sharp. If I said something she didn't like, her corrections came wrapped in charm, the kind that made you feel small for even noticing. She never raised her voice, never needed to. Her power was in the silences, the way she rearranged the dishwasher after I loaded it, how she'd suggest next time I should call ahead. At birthdays, she'd direct the schedule like an event planner, handing me a slice of cake and thanking me for understanding the new system. I smiled back, even when it stung. The last barbecue before everything unraveled was textbook Emily. The backyard was spotless, the appetizers labeled with handwritten tags. She wore white linen like she'd never known sweat. Tom was on the grill, and I could see the way she coached him from the porch, pointing with a wine glass, correcting the angle of the spatula. Lily, sweet Lily, ran across the lawn with wild hair and grass-stained knees, laughing like the world hadn't taught her caution yet. She waved to me, asked me to watch her dance, and for a moment my heart swelled. That child still saw me. She hadn't learned yet how to filter affection through her mother's lens. I watched the scene from a patio chair, too far from the conversation, but too close to leave. Emily's friends talked about home renovations and yoga retreats. I nodded when spoken to, but mostly I listened to the wind. When Emily asked me ever so kindly not to give Lily candy before dinner next time, I apologized. Then I sat quietly and wondered how I'd become a guest in my own story. I told myself it was temporary. Families go through phases. If I just stayed kind and helpful, the closeness would return. But looking back now, I realize that distance wasn't accidental. It was being built one polite correction at a time, brick by brick, until I was outside and didn't even know it. Emily sat down beside me like we were about to share a secret. She had a glass of wine in one hand, and that smile she wore when she was about to tell me something I wasn't going to like. Her voice was sweet, quiet, meant only for me, but the tone settled into my skin like a cold breeze. She started with compliments. How grateful she was that I came. How much Lily loved having me around. How lucky Tom was to have such a supportive mother. I nodded, smiled, let her talk, though something about the rhythm of her praise felt rehearsed. Then came the shift. She said she and Tom had been talking about structure, about consistency for the kids. She said they'd noticed how Lily seemed confused after my visits, how I encouraged her to play in the dirt and gave her candy before dinner. Her words were gentle, but each one landed with quiet precision. I asked what she meant by confused. She tilted her head and said, "Children need clear expectations, especially at this age." She was careful with her phrasing, never accusing, always framing her concerns as observations. But I could feel the undercurrent. I wasn't doing it right. I wasn't helpful. I was in some subtle way the problem. She mentioned boundaries, not in a harsh way. She made it sound like a parenting philosophy, something she and Tom had agreed on after reading an article. She said it would be best if I called before stopping by. That sometimes Lily needed quiet time and that routines were important. I sat there nodding the way you do when the conversation is already over. But something inside me tightened. It wasn't the words. It was the way she watched my reaction, like she was logging every blink, every breath. Like this wasn't just about parenting. This was about control. About keeping me exactly where she wanted me. She touched my arm and thanked me for being understanding. I told her I always wanted to support their choices, but my voice felt far away from my body. I couldn't tell if I was angry or ashamed or both. I only knew I felt smaller than I had 5 minutes earlier. Across the yard, Lily was twirling in circles, arms outstretched, laughing at the sky. Tom was flipping burgers, his back to us. I wondered if he knew we were having this conversation. I wondered if he'd agreed with everything she said, or if he'd just gone along with it because it was easier. Emily stood and adjusted the cushions on the patio chairs, smoothing them like nothing had happened. I watched her walk back to her friends and felt a ripple of something I couldn't name, not quite fear, not quite rage, but it crawled under my ribs and stayed there. Then my phone buzzed. I pulled it from my purse and read the message once, twice. Walk away. Don't talk to anyone. Now. I sat in my car for a long time after the police arrived, staring out the windshield like answers might show up if I waited long enough. My hands trembled as I dialed Tom. He picked up right away. His voice was tight, confused, like someone trying to convince himself everything was still fine. He told me the police weren't there for him. They were there for Emily. They'd raided her office earlier that morning. Something about financial irregularities. A tip. He didn't know much yet, but they were asking questions. A lot of them. I asked if Lily was okay. He said she was with a neighbor. Emily was being interviewed. No handcuffs, not yet, but the air in his voice felt heavy. I asked if he was with her, and he said no. He said he needed a minute. I didn't press. I drove home on autopilot, heart pounding, mind grasping for clarity. My phone was still buzzing with texts from unknown numbers. I didn't answer them. I just sat on my porch, wrapped in a blanket I barely remembered grabbing, and tried to piece together a picture that no longer made sense. That's when the memories started hitting differently. There was the time I mentioned trouble accessing my bank's online portal, and Emily offered to help. She set up the new password herself. Told me it was easier that way. I let her. I even thanked her. Later, she joked about how bad I was with technology. Everyone laughed. I laughed too. Another time, my car insurance lapsed. I didn't know until I got a notice in the mail. Emily said she'd call and straighten it out. She offered to manage my automatic payments. Said it would give me peace of mind. I gave her my information without thinking twice. When I sold my old car and couldn't figure out how to wire the deposit, Emily insisted on handling it. She said the buyer could send the money to her and she'd transfer it to me. I never checked the paperwork. I just trusted. Each of those moments had seemed helpful at the time. Thoughtful, the kind of support family gives. But now they glowed in my memory like warning lights I hadn't seen. What scared me most wasn't what she might have taken. It was how easy I'd made it for her. How completely I'd handed over the keys to my life because she smiled while asking. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the dark, my phone beside me, unread messages stacking up. Just after midnight, I got another one. This one was different. It said, "I know what she's done. I can explain everything. My name is Rachel." I hesitated. I read it 3 times before replying. All I sent back was, "Who are you?" A few seconds later, she answered, "Someone like you. Someone who trusted her. Someone who lost more than I want to remember." I stared at the screen pulse in my throat. I didn't know if Rachel was real or if I was falling deeper into something I didn't understand. But something in her words landed. They had the ring of experience of exhaustion. She asked if we could meet, said it had to be somewhere public. I told her, okay, that I'd come, that I needed to know. Because no matter what Emily had done or how far this went, I couldn't sit in the dark anymore pretending it wasn't real. I needed answers, even if they broke me. Even if they changed everything I thought I knew about the woman who had once called me Mom. We met on a gray bench near the duck pond, the kind where mothers feed breadcrumbs to toddlers, and nobody looks twice. Rachel was already there when I arrived. She looked younger than I expected, maybe late 40s, hair pulled back in a simple knot, no makeup, just tired eyes and a manila envelope in her lap. She greeted me gently, like she knew I was holding too much already. We sat in silence for a minute. I watched a child toss crackers at the water and tried to figure out how to ask the question that had been gnawing at me since the text. Rachel answered before I spoke. "Emily isn't who you think she is. She'd been part of a network. Not official, not organized like some movie, but a loose connection of people who knew how to exploit trust. Women like Emily didn't carry weapons. They carried charm, patience, and enough data to pick the perfect target. Rachel had been married to Emily's cousin. That's how they met. Back then, Emily went by a different name. She claimed to be a business consultant good with money. Rachel's father had just died, and she'd inherited more than she could handle. Emily offered to help. She didn't take everything at once. It started with account access just to make things easier. Then came investment advice. Then came signed documents Rachel didn't remember signing. By the time she realized what had happened, Emily was gone, and so was most of her money. Rachel had gone to the police. She had proof, but not enough to make it stick. Emily resurfaced 2 years later with a new last name and a new story. She was married to Tom by then. Rachel found out through a mutual acquaintance. She tried to warn him, but he didn't respond. He probably never even saw the message. I asked why Emily chose me. Rachel looked at me like I already knew. "Because you're stable. You own your home. You have retirement savings. And you're close enough to influence Tom's decisions, especially when it comes to your granddaughter." She explained how women like me get framed as forgetful, difficult, overbearing. All Emily had to do was drop enough hints to make it seem like I couldn't be trusted. Then she could take control under the guise of protecting Lily, supporting Tom, easing my burdens. I felt sick. Not just because it made sense, but because I could remember the exact moments when I'd started to doubt myself. Rachel handed me the envelope. It held photocopies of emails, notarized documents, and one photo I couldn't stop staring at. Emily laughing with a man I didn't recognize years before she met my son. I asked Rachel what she wanted from me. She said nothing. Just be careful. I do not underestimate what Emily was capable of. She doesn't leave loose ends. The words hit harder than anything else, not because they were dramatic, but because they were said quietly, like someone who'd already lived the damage. I left the park with the envelope tucked against my chest. I didn't know what I was going to do next, but I knew one thing for sure. Emily had planned this. She'd built it step by step. And now, I was the one who had to decide whether to stay silent or finally push back. We met her at a small cafe near the courthouse, a place with chipped tables and weak coffee. Emily showed up 10 minutes late, sunglasses on, lips tight. She didn't smile when she saw us. She just sat down like this was a business meeting she hadn't agreed to but intended to control anyway. Tom spoke first. His voice was quiet but steady. He asked her what the police were looking for. He asked why they'd shown up at the house, why her office had been shut down. Emily didn't flinch. She said it was a misunderstanding, a paperwork issue, an angry former client with a grudge. She called it harassment. She looked at me when she said that part. Like I was the root of everything, like she was trying to make Tom wonder if I was the one stirring trouble. I kept my voice calm when I asked about Rachel. I watched her expression shift just slightly, a blink too long, a breath that wasn't casual. She asked who that was. I told her she already knew. Tom leaned forward. He told her he'd seen the documents, that he'd talked to the detective, that this wasn't a rumor or a grudge or a misunderstanding. It was real, and she needed to be honest. Emily laughed. Not a full laugh, just a breath of disbelief. She called it absurd, said he was being manipulated. She turned to me and said she always knew I had trouble separating fantasy from fact. Said maybe I should get my memory checked, that these kinds of things happened to women my age. Tom's face went pale. He told her to stop. He told her that wasn't okay, but she wasn't talking to him anymore. She was locked onto me. She said I'd always resented her, that I hated not being in control. I was jealous of her role in Tom's life, that I'd always tried to turn him against her, and now I was doing it again. She said she'd protect Lily from this kind of toxicity. I stood up, not because I wanted to argue, but because I knew there was nothing left to say. I looked at my son, and I saw it hit him. Not in words, in the silence, in the look on his face when he realized she wasn't trying to explain. She was trying to win. Emily grabbed her purse and walked out. No goodbye. No apology. Just a storm of perfume and fury and silence. Tom sat there for a long time after. He didn't cry. He just stared at the door like it had betrayed him. Then he looked at me and asked why I hadn't told him sooner. I said I didn't know what I was seeing. I thought maybe it was just me. Later that day, a detective called. He confirmed what Rachel had already told me. Emily was under investigation in 3 states. Fraud, identity theft, financial coercion. They'd found evidence she'd changed her name twice, that she'd drained bank accounts using family access and disguised transactions as caregiving expenses. He said we'd likely hear more in the coming weeks, that the charges were being finalized. Tom should check all his accounts, and that I should change every password I had. After I hung up, I sat in the kitchen with a cup of tea I didn't remember making. Tom was upstairs putting Lily to bed. The house was quiet in a way I hadn't felt in years. It wasn't over, not yet. But the spell had broken. The truth was ugly and hard. But it was ours now, and I wasn't afraid of it anymore. The house is quieter now, but in a better way. No more walking on eggshells. No more silent tension thickening the air. Just the soft hum of a dishwasher, the squeak of Lily's sneakers on the tile, and Tom humming off-key while packing school lunches. Emily is in prison. The trial didn't take long once the evidence was laid bare. Tom has full custody, and though it took him a while to stop blaming himself, he's getting there. We all are. I moved in temporarily after everything happened, but weeks became months. And now it just feels natural. Lily crawls into my lap like she used to when she was little. Max, her younger brother, leaves sticky handprints on my windows and calls me Nana like it's the most sacred word he knows. I tuck them in at night. I read the same books over and over, and I've never felt more needed in my life. Tonight, Lily asked for a story I'd never told before. She wanted something about real heroes. So I sat beside her, brushing the hair from her forehead, and began with a woman who didn't wear armor or carry a sword. She wasn't young. She wasn't fast. But she saw something others didn't, and when it counted, she didn't stay quiet. Lily's eyes stayed wide the whole time. She asked if the grandmother in the story was afraid. I told her yes. But she did it anyway, because that's what real bravery looks like. By the time I finished, she was half asleep, her hand curled around mine. I kissed her cheek and turned out the light, whispering that I loved her more than anything. Because I do. Because even after everything, we're still here. I used to think family was about blood and tradition, holidays and hand-me-down recipes. Now I know it's simpler and harder than that. It's about showing up when things fall apart. It's about who holds you steady when the lies come crashing down. This version of my life doesn't look like the one I imagined, but it's real, and it's ours. And finally, it feels like home.